Welcome to this explainer. Okay, picture this. We're jumping right into one of the absolute wildest geographic and historical anomalies on the planet. I want you to imagine a tiny ancient nation. It's completely landlocked, entirely swallowed up by a modern European superpower, yet somehow, against all odds, it's managed to maintain total independence for over 1,700 years. Honestly, it sounds like something straight out of a fantasy novel, right? But it's a very real place.
Which brings us to our central mystery for today, and it's a baffling one. How exactly does a microstate survive inside Italy for 17 centuries? Think about what this place has seen. It watched the Roman Empire completely collapse. It stood firm through the absolute chaos of the Middle Ages. It resisted the massive sweeping conquests of Napoleon and somehow navigated the sheer devastation of 2 world wars. Really, how on earth did they pull that off?
To really wrap our heads around the scale of this achievement, let's put things into perspective. 61 square kilometers. That is the entire footprint of the Republic of San Marino. It's an enclave completely enveloped by its giant neighbor, Italy. And it literally only shares a border with a single Italian province, Rimini. It's just this tiny, sun-kissed Mediterranean speck on the map, but it holds a massive title. It is officially the world's oldest surviving republic. Okay, let's dive into this roadmap. Here is how we're going to unpack this epic David and Goliath story. First, we'll look at the 61 square kilometer anomaly. Second, born on Mount Titano. Third, outwitting empires and wars. Fourth, inside the oldest republic. And finally, we'll wrap up with the microstate today.
All right, Section 1, the 61 square kilometer anomaly.
Let's talk about this geographic absurdity. Now, when you stack San Marino up against other European microstates, its uniqueness is basically off the charts. Like, you've got the Vatican, right? But that's sacrosanct, driven entirely by religious authority. Then you have places like Monaco and Liechtenstein, which function as constitutional monarchies or oligarchies. But San Marino? It is a completely functional constitutional republic. It's literally the only remaining microstate embedded squarely inside Italy's wide-open political system that operates as a true democracy. And they've been running this system for centuries.
Moving into Section 2, born on Mount Titano. Here, geography basically serves as the ultimate defense.
So the sweeping history of this republic kicks off way back in the year 301. We're talking about a Christian stonecutter named Marinus. He was fleeing his home in present-day Croatia because he was trying to escape intense persecution under the Roman Emperor Diocletian. He ends up finding refuge way up on the rugged summit of Mount Titano, and he just starts a small community. Now, over the centuries, this little group faced some brutal tests, like the terrifying sieges between the Guelphs and Ghibellines in the 1400s, but they held on. By 1503, the borders that exist today were permanently locked in, and by 1600, they adopted a constitution. And get this, that exact same constitution is still in effect right now. No way, right?
And this brilliantly illustrates how they survived. Perched right on top of the steep limestone cliffs of Mount Titano are 3 seriously formidable medieval fortresses, the Guaita, Sesta, and Montale towers. But here's the absolutely crucial point. While all the expanding Italian city-states around them were building fortresses to conquer their neighbors, San Marino's triple walls and towering structures were not built for offense. They were built for hiding. The entire design was meant to prevent discovery and keep the outside world totally at bay to preserve their autonomy.
On to Section 3, outwitting empires and wars. This is where guile and strict neutrality really come into play. Because you see, when high walls just weren't going to cut it, they had to rely on pure guile. A perfectly brilliant example of this happened in 1797. Napoleon Bonaparte's massive conquering army literally arrives at their doorstep. So what do? Instead of just surrendering, local leaders sent an envoy. This group included a crafty lawyer named Filippo Molaroni, who basically tried to bluff Napoleon using a written declaration of independence. It's like the ultimate high-stakes poker move. And remarkably, it actually worked. The French general was caught off guard, kind of amused by the whole thing, and he ended up offering San Marino a bloodless peace and French protection. That single bluff allowed them to completely bypass the destruction of the Napoleonic Wars. Fast forward to World War II, and that absolute commitment to neutrality was put to the ultimate test. They actually got accidentally bombed by American forces in 1944, who had mistaken a San Marino town for an Italian target. But even then, the Republic stood its ground. In September of that year, they did something incredibly brave. They sheltered roughly 500 wounded, unarmed Serbo-Croatian soldiers who had fled across the border trying to escape German forces. This is exactly why their neutrality matters so much. It wasn't just some clever political gimmick to save their own skins. It was a deeply held honor system with very real human stakes. The government brought these refugees in, fully risking their own survival just to maintain their identity as a true land of refuge. Which leads us to Section 4, inside the oldest republic. Let's take a look at the ancient machinery that keeps this place running.
I have to say, the political oddity factor here is just off the charts. Instead of having a single president or a prime minister calling the shots, San Marino actually has 2 co-heads of state. They're called the Captains Regent. And here is the kicker. They don't serve for 4 or 5 years like we're used to. They serve for exactly 6 months. That's it. This entire system, which again goes all the way back to their 1600 constitution, was specifically engineered to prevent any single person from holding on to power for too long and creating a dictatorship.
Now, what's really interesting about this setup is how neatly the power is distributed, especially for a population of just over 30,000 people. You've got the Grand and General Council, which is a 60-member legislative body elected every 5 years. They are the ones who actually select those Captains Regent. Then, for the executive branch, you have the Congress of State, and that's capped at a maximum of 10 secretaries. Finally, there's a tiny, very streamlined judicial branch. It is this highly localized, deeply representative democracy that perfectly balances state regulation with public freedom, and it's been working for them for centuries.
All right, bringing it home to Section 5, the microstate today. Let's see how they're facing the 21st century.
So, by pretty much every metric, they handle modern integration incredibly well. And that starts with a seriously high standard of living. Consider this. An astonishing 100% of the population has at least a primary education. On top of that, 93% holds secondary education or higher. It's a phenomenally educated society, one that has managed to build a totally robust, modern infrastructure right on top of its medieval foundations.
Economically speaking, they've definitely diversified way beyond the agriculture of their past. Today, their main economic engines are completely fueled by tourism. We're talking millions of day trippers flooding in from Rimini just to check out the stunning UNESCO World Heritage sites up on Mount Titano. But they also heavily leverage their unique regulatory status as a tax haven and a hub for banking and finance. Plus, through a very special monetary agreement, they actually officially adopted the euro back in 2002, so their currency is fully integrated with the rest of Europe.
But, it's not all fairy tales and ancient towers. San Marino is facing some very real, very intense modern pressures right now. Over the last few decades, their banking sector has definitely struggled with things like non-performing loans and the messy fallout from subprime banking challenges. And because they sit completely 100% inside Italy, both the Italian government and the broader European Union have been applying massive pressure on San Marino to reform its cash-locked banks and implement incredibly strict anti-money laundering regulations. They've literally had to heavily overhaul their legislation just to get onto the OECD whitelist and keep their international legitimacy intact. Which leaves us with this final, really provocative thought. For literally 1,700 years, San Marino survived by relying on isolation, incredibly high walls, strict neutrality, and some very clever diplomacy. But here we are in an era of digital banking, massive international tax standards, and a globally interconnected economy. You kind of just can't pull up the drawbridge anymore, right? So the big question is, can those ancient survival instincts adapt fast enough to protect this incredibly unique microstate in the modern financial world? It's a fascinating question, and for sure it's one we're going to be watching very closely. Thank you so much for joining me on this explainer, and as always, keep learning.